Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a great holiday. Today we're destroying Princess Mononoke. In this series, I apply the grand unified theory of storytelling to things we think are stories to show that they are not actually stories, and then I try to fix them. Because I know this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people, though, I thought I'd start this with a message for Miyazaki-san, just in case anyone ever provides him with a translation. So, dear Miyazaki-san, please excuse the noises outside. Princess Mononoke was the first of your films I saw, and I was fortunate enough to see its theatrical release in the United States. No matter what I say in this video, I want you to know your words have inspired me since I was a kid. They continue to inspire me, and regardless of my criticisms, they always will. Nothing I say in this video diminishes the imaginative value of your art in any way. My only wish here is that my words help you write better films, and to that end, I am happy to offer my services to help you write a complete story anytime. As an initial suggestion, though, I have one that is very simple. All your audience wants from you is a story in which kami exist. It can be any time period and any narrative you want. If you want us to feel connected to nature, though, that's what needs doing. Give us a movie that shows us connected to nature. When this film ends, you should not have killed magic, left your hero either powerless or without memory of the story, or changed anything about how the world works, including kami. You can, however, change anything about what's in the world, but it needs to include both humans and kami, and probably throwing in yokai would also be good. If you want to invent new ones, that's great, but all we want from you is a story that shows our connection to nature and doesn't undermine it. The following video covers this very topic. So we are going to go through all of Princess Mononoke. This movie definitely deserves a lot of attention to go over all the details, so I'm going to try to cover everything. And also give respect to the artwork by putting forth this effort. You'll see this video is going to be kind of long, but so much work went into this and all animation. I mean, animation is just one of the greatest forms of media. I love it so much, and there's so much good world building here, and there's so much talent. It kind of feels a shame that it shouldn't be taken to the finish line and really give us everything that it could be. So I'm hoping I can show you a little bit of that here. So the movie starts here, and this first sequence needs some slight alteration to be a complete story, but overall, it's a fairly, if not overly simple intro narrative. So the beginning of the story is itself kind of a mini self-contained story, and I think that's kind of cool. This movie also does some other cool structural things. So we get Ashitaka, he's in his village, and then something happens, and then we see the demon come out of the forest, and that it used to be a boar god. All the little tentacles kind of fly up, and we see what's underneath, and it's the boar, and then they all smack back down, and it starts running, and it goes to attack his elk, Yakul, but then Ashitaka, shoots the arrow at it, and it starts barreling down and takes out the lookout post, and then Ashitaka falls into the forest with the old man there, and he tells him that if the demon touches him, he'll be cursed. So Ashitaka gets on Yakul and rides to stop the demon, and of course it heads towards the village, and then it's chasing him for a little bit, and he tells it to, or I think he asks it why it's rampaging, and it doesn't answer. And then kind of on the outskirts there, it sees the villagers and starts running towards them, so Ashitaka has to head it off, and that's when it grabs his arm with its tentacle and it curses him, and then he kind of flanks it and shoots it and takes it down with some more arrows. And the demon dies with a prophecy to the villagers. It says, "Hear me, loathsome humans, you will know my agony and my hatred." Or in the English dub, I think it's, "Disgusting creatures, soon you will know my hate and suffer as I have suffered." It's pretty cool. But as an epilogue to this intro, Ashitaka learns from the village's wise woman that it was an iron ball that caused the boar god to turn into a demon, and that he might be able to seek out a cure to his curse in the lands where the iron came from. So Ashitaka is told that if he goes on this quest, that he won't be able to return, but he accepts anyway. There is definitely a problem here of not having established the hero's motivation, and him being banished is both completely unnecessary and destructive to the story. We'll come back to this. Regardless, though, now we're in Act 2. This is a major problem for more reasons than we've only just started this film, and also don't have a motivation for our hero, but I'll cover what happens next before explaining all of this, or why all of this is wrong, and we'll also circle back to some more commentary on the story's intro, destroying story potential. So Ashitaka leaves his village, and a traveling sequence follows. He stops at a spring to wash his arm and says the curse is getting darker. He then sees a village on fire, and samurai are attacking. Ashitaka is attacked by some of the samurai who shoot arrows at him, but he quickly escapes on Yakul. Down the road, another group of samurai try heading off Ashitaka, but he shoots an arrow that offs one of their heads, and they give up while Ashitaka rides away. Ashitaka buys rice with gold at the next town over and meets Jigo, who helps him with the rice vendor. They leave the village but are pursued by highwaymen and decide to run so they can't be pursued. It's not shown but implied in dialogue that Ashitaka let Jigo jump on and ride Yakul with him to safety. Ashitaka and Jigo then make camp for the night, and Ashitaka tells Jigo about his curse and asks him about the Iron Ball. Jigo doesn't know about the Iron Ball, but tells Ashitaka that the forest gods can be found to the west. Technically, this is the only useful information Ashitaka gets from Jigo, but to justify the whole sequence, it's explained in dialogue by Ashitaka that he lost the demon's trail near the village being attacked by samurai. How he lost the trail of a giant crawling demon who decays everything it touches is a huge break in immersion that everyone senses in this scene. But because everything is glossed over in dialogue, it keeps it away from your eyes and just lets the dissatisfaction sit in the back of your mind as you struggle to re-immerse yourself in the next scene. Everyone feels the break of immersion after the porridge scene. So, what are the major problems here? Well, this sequence is not a self-contained story, but it's not doing a good job of what it seems like it's trying to do, which is be in Act 1 of Act 2, which is kind of cool. So in terms of content, it wants to, number one, establish that Ashitaka's arm gives him super strength, and two, that Ashitaka meets Jigo and then trusts him, although why, I have no idea because this is never justified in the film, and again requires a break of immersion, having Ashitaka lose the demon's trail. First and foremost, though, we've barely started this film, and for some reason we're in Act 2. And yet, our hero still does not have any motivation as a hero. The arm scene is fine, where we see his super strength, but that's the only thing that matters for the next 3 scenes of this sequence. While the opening sequence was cool, it really should have given Ashitaka a reason to leave his village that wasn't just he had a choice between death or banishment and chose banishment. That ruins the whole story because now, even if he succeeds in lifting his curse, Ashitaka can't return as prince or even king of his own people. It would have made much more sense if the boar god's death as a demon put a curse on the village, and this meant Ashitaka had a royal duty to quest to defeat the evil that corrupted Nago's spirit and set it to rest, or his village would remain cursed. There's another thing here, though, that needs to be addressed, which is the lack of gravitas. So instead of saying Ashitaka needs to seek his cure with eyes unclouded by hate, the wise woman should instead be telling Ashitaka that he needs to be careful to not lose himself as the boar god did, and to keep his humanity. The movie then needs to pay out with this narrative by having San in the war tempt Ashitaka to join San and embrace his curse. Anyway, back to the current sequence. Ashitaka has almost no reason to trust Jigo, even if he's a priest. Setting up camp with him, even with his super strength, makes it seem like Ashitaka has a death wish. The scene where they're eating is also made completely unnecessary because Ashitaka doesn't need to learn about the forest spirit from Jigo, and when asked about the Iron Ball, Jigo says he doesn't know anything, so the entire sequence was pointless. Ashitaka never needs to trust Jigo, Jigo doesn't give him any needed exposition, and Jigo also doesn't attack Ashitaka, so there's no reason for either of these scenes, either as a mini-story or in internal Act 1. As for why Ashitaka doesn't need to learn about the forest spirit from Jigo, it's because not only does he get led to the forest spirit later on by the Kodama, but he actually sees it, and then later on gets more exposition from other characters. He learns nothing from Jigo when they meet. It's completely pointless. Another odd problem is that, although it's kind of a small one, is that Jigo tells Ashitaka that the forest spirit is far to the west, but we find out in the next sequence that it's the next location Ashitaka arrives at in the narrative. We don't have much to go on, but there doesn't seem to be any significant passage of time between the porridge scene and when Ashitaka encounters the men who fell from the cliff during the wolf attack in the next scene. If Jigo was lying, then this is never addressed, so it may just be a continuity error. It's not a translation error. It's the same in both the original Japanese subtitles and in the English dub. If I were to rewrite this scene, it would be in the context of Ashitaka's hero motivation as he tracks the trail left behind by the demon. Along the way, he would probably encounter some others affected by the demon and perhaps other kami. But without rewriting this scene, or rewriting this movie, I'm not sure what the exact details of such a sequence would be. But the next sequence serves as Act 2 for Act 2. So the wolves attack the returning Irontown caravan, and then Ashitaka finds the two workers who fell from the cliff, and then briefly meets San and the wolves, still wounded from battle, as are the men he rescues, of whom Kuroku briefly tells Ashitaka of what happened. Ashitaka takes the wounded men through the forest back to Irontown led by the Kodama. Ashitaka then catches a glimpse of the forest spirit in the sacred grove, and he then gets the men, or before getting the men back to Irontown. Structurally, this mini-act isn't terrible, but it would make more sense if Ashitaka met San and the wolves first, and then found the wounded men and decided to help them rather than pursue San and the wolves. This would also provide a clearer characterization for the Kodama. All the characters in this movie are just too blurry in their characterization. They need to have more clarity. Ashitaka's decision to help the men here would also have more meaning and clarity after the previous sequence was fixed, having followed Ashitaka along the journey from his village, after encountering both humans and kami affected by the situation. Seeing a wounded Moro after the previous sequence was fixed would give a clearer idea that Ashitaka knew a wounded Moro might very well be fighting against becoming a demon just as the boar had. If the film as written, though, we first see Moro and know nothing, so we expect she'll be very powerful, especially after Lady Eboshi has just stated that bullets can't kill her and that she is a literal god, but later we'll be very disappointed. That disappointment would be lessened quite a bit if only these few fixes so far were applied, but we'll continue addressing Moro and the other kami later. Kind of feel like I want to say a little bit more here, but I'll come back to this at the end if I have any additional thoughts. The next sequence serves as Act 3 of Act 2. Here, Ashitaka arrives at Irontown with the survivors he rescued, and he meets the villagers. Oh, yeah, no, the other thing, with the San narrative here, him choosing to go to the villagers, I guess might seem like an initial subversion of him being tempted by San, but there should also definitely be more to that, and maybe San should, I don't know, tell him something, or maybe he sees something else that gets him to go there, or makes him to want to go with her more. But really, he definitely should be tempted when he sees the opportunity when she goes to Irontown later. But we'll get to this. So the next sequence, serves as Act 3 of Act 2. Ashitaka arrives at Irontown. So throughout the next scene, Ashitaka learns that this is the source of what turned the boar god into a demon, and also what it would mean if he were to kill the one responsible. Without Lady Eboshi, the lives of all these villagers would be thrown into turmoil. Ashitaka does manage to defeat the villain at the end of this sequence by knocking out Lady Eboshi and saving San, but for some reason the movie then has a villager accidentally shoot and mortally wound Ashitaka. What follows is a completely unnecessary side plot where San brings Ashitaka to the forest spirit who cures his wounds but doesn't remove his curse. This is frustratingly vague yet again and doesn't add anything to the story. Ashitaka getting shot basically ruins this sequence and the entire build-up of this movie's second act. The plot we see, however, where we're basically first introduced to Jigo, is actually important. So this is right after, or this is sort of during this little sequence here. It kind of switches to Jigo's perspective. So here he watches as the Nightwalker transforms into the deer god, going back to the sacred grove, and he explains to the hunters that the Emperor has given them sanction to take the deer god's head. What he doesn't explain, though, after seeing that the boars have gathered for war, is that this is actually good because it means he can lead Lady Eboshi to the deer god without worrying about the boars, and he can send the Emperor's men to help defend Irontown. But anyway, now we're in the home stretch of this breakdown, but unfortunately, and confusingly, we're not even halfway through the film. So the pacing of this movie with its structure might seem a bit haphazard, but something clever is happening, right? Right? Yes, actually, something cool is definitely happening. So as we saw with Act 1 being a self-contained story, Act 2 kind of being broken up as a story with each of its own acts, Act 3 seems to play out as a series of 3 separate self-contained stories for each act, or at least that's what this movie seems to be trying to do. I genuinely applaud this effort, but this is one of those times where you can really see that writers are just doing this on instinct and just how rough all of their edges are. Miyazaki just doesn't have the character resources to do this properly, despite the wide-ranging cast. Aside from pacing, the problem continues to be that characters in this film all have mushy motivations. It's like they're all gray, fuzzy jellies. They're just too similar, and none of them are actually interesting. They all just fall short of interesting because Miyazaki is afraid of giving his characters strong motivation. He wants everybody in his movies to be unsure and confused, which makes for absolutely abysmal writing and depressing characters and narratives. Ashitaka isn't a hero, and Lady Eboshi, while being a villain, is constantly framed as a hero. Despite everyone commenting on how this makes the story deeper, it's clear watching the film that it doesn't. It just makes it bland where it should be vibrant, and disappointing when it should be exciting. So the next sequence that matters is the meeting of the wolves and the Boar clan, who have decided to go to war against the humans of Irontown to save the forest. Meanwhile, Lady Eboshi has joined up with Jigo to kill the forest spirit so the Emperor can have its head, and Lady Eboshi will control the forest, with the Emperor keeping her neighboring enemy, Lord Asano, at bay. I don't know why I had such trouble saying that. The problem here is that this Lord Asano subplot seems to come completely out of nowhere. It's just very unnecessary as well. There's no explanation for why the Boars aren't attacking Irontown directly, nor why this Lord Asano plot has any meaning in the narrative. It even seems to confuse the plot. The deal with the Emperor could have easily just been to grant Lady Eboshi official lordship over her lands, becoming a recognized territory by the imperial government, or something to that effect. Jigo should have just shown up with his letter to Lady Eboshi about getting the deer god's head, and word that the Boars will attack soon, with a promise to send for backup forces if she accepts the mission. It's funny because even in the movie, Jigo comments to her how pointless it is to be battling with Asano when they can just get the deer god's head now and kill Asano later. Unintentionally lampshading your own writing mistake is something you don't see very often, but I laughed. If a more confusing plot with Lord Asano is what you want, though, it might be helpful earlier on to establish that neighboring territories are antagonistic to Irontown to set up this threat. Maybe have some of Asano's ninja try and sabotage Irontown, or maybe have a band of his samurai attack their mining operations, or just anything that establishes a need for protection and or established legitimacy for Irontown with the imperial government. Also make Jigo be behind it all, coordinating with Lord Asano. So far, though, all we've heard about the people of Irontown fighting against are the forest gods, basically right up until the cut in the movie where they're firing on Asano's attacking samurai. The guns seem to be exclusively to fight the giant kami, who want the humans out of their forest, although earlier in the film, when Ashitaka is in Irontown, Lady Eboshi does mention to him that her guns can kill monsters and pierce samurai armor, but she doesn't say anything about being at war with a neighboring lord. This scene with Ashitaka also features Lady Eboshi firing a warning shot into the hills to scare away the apes, who you'll notice are not Asano's samurai or scouts. The Lord Asano plot comes completely out of left field with no explanation, and it's meaningless here as a story device. It would make for a good sequel, though, if Miyazaki hadn't basically killed magic at the end of this movie, and also for some unexplainable reason that breaks my immersion, has Ashitaka's village tell him he's exiled at the beginning of the film after defending it from the demon's attack just to get him into the narrative. This film, at some points, really just, it doesn't seem like bad writing, it kind of seems like fever dream writing. Like the further along Miyazaki movies get, you can really just sense the production deadlines. And in order to fix this sequence, I'd have to rewrite the scene between the boars and the wolves, and also rewrite the scene with Jigo and Lady Eboshi. It could have been a great sequence, but with everything wrong before this and everything wrong happening during this sequence, it just continues butchering the story. Then we get to the beginning of Story 2 for Act 3. This begins with the conversation between Moro and Ashitaka, and this brings me to my next major problem with this film. The kami in this movie suck. See, I told you we'd come back to this. The only one that has any sort of defined power is the forest spirit, the deer god, but its capacity as the Nightwalker is completely unexplored. We could have gotten so much more with how steeped in magic powers and affecting the world kami are, but in this movie we get basically nothing. This scene where Moro basically speaks with Ashitaka No, basically, this scene where Moro speaks with Ashitaka while the others sleep was a slim opportunity to get just a tiny meager slice more, but it slips away like all our other dashed hopes in this film. The closest thing we get to a magic power for Moro is that she can apparently hear the forest suffering. This is not qualified in any meaningful way, as she simply says it's crying out in pain. Well, how loud is it? Is it keeping you up, Moro? What about during the day when everything seems peaceful and we just hear calm, serene forest sounds? Is the forest spirit hearing any of this? What's it doing about it? Do the boars hear it? Is it helping motivate them? We don't know any of this because the movie doesn't tell us anything. How we went from Pom Poko and My Neighbor Totoro to this? Well, obviously Miyazaki doesn't know the grand unified theory of storytelling, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. So Ashitaka goes to warn Iron Town that the boars are going to attack, while San goes with the wolves to fight with the boars. Asano is attacking Iron Town, Ashitaka sees this, and then he learns Lady Eboshi has gone to kill the deer god. Ashitaka then goes to the front lines of the boar battle and finds one of the wolves to guide him to San, which is where he knows Lady Eboshi will be, while he tells the men there that Iron Town is under siege from Asano. And next, we have, finally, Story 3 of Act 3, and this begins with Akoto, the wounded boar god, being provoked by Jigo's men in the skins of his boars through the forest to go to the forest spirit, to the sacred grove, but San tries to stop this. Akoto then turns into a demon when they reach the sacred grove and traps San in his corruption. The forest spirit arrives and kills both Moro and Akoto. Moro's also there. It then begins to transform into the Nightwalker, but Lady Eboshi shoots it in the neck, severing the head. The body spreads out over the land, killing everything it touches in search of its head, until eventually Jigo is trapped, and Ashitaka and San get him to give back the head. Ashitaka and San lift the head to the forest spirit to give it back, but not before it has to return to being the deer god, and so it dies anyway. This now means the god of life and death is dead, although a Kodama is shown at the end after things start blooming again. This seems like Miyazaki is just covering up a botched ending because he definitely killed magic, so there shouldn't be any Kodama that can manifest after that point in history. Regardless, Ashitaka doesn't end up with San because she still hasn't learned her lesson and opts to stay living with the wolves while Ashitaka decides to live in Irontown. Nothing is mentioned about his home village, but I assume they meet an equally depressing end, if not more. So basically, the hero doesn't defeat the villain doesn't get redeemed, the hero also doesn't find love, and because of his failure to either defeat or redeem the villain, or villains, it appears Ashitaka is also partly responsible for killing magic, since he had many opportunities to kill Lady Eboshi and didn't. He and San could have also probably taken on Jigo and his men with the help of the boars and the wolves, who would have just heard in their meeting that Lady Eboshi is now dead, so they don't need to attack Irontown tomorrow. But definitely should kill Jigo and his men because the Emperor still wants them to kill the Forest Spirit and ruin magic so he can have a chance at immortality. Then we could have gotten an even more awesome sequel. At the end of the first movie, Irontown makes peace with the forest gods and negotiates a way that they can continue mining sustainably. Ashitaka and San get married, but still live separately in Irontown and the forest, respectively, most of the time, while the region's politics are still settling with this new arrangement. Maybe they build a Torii Gate to formalize this arrangement, giving further legitimacy to Irontown. In the sequel, this is when Asano sets his eyes on Irontown's exploding wealth and begins antagonizing them. So here is where we meet Asano. In this movie, we get to see the wider world, and maybe other kami in other places. Maybe someone from Irontown needs to go meet with an imperial delegation, and they get caught up in higher order politics at both a human and kami level. This would be especially treacherous having just thwarted the Emperor's efforts to gain immortality in the last movie, although maybe he doesn't know the details of this yet. Maybe Ashitaka's heritage as an Emishi prince could come up here as well. Certainly at the end, though, Ashitaka should take San back to his village. There's so much more that could be explored in this world and give people more of what they want, which is an animated fantasy that depicts the supernatural world of Japanese kami during the Muromachi period. It's so stupid that Princess Mononoke ends with the death of magic. It's not even historically accurate to Japanese mythology because stories about kami and yokai continue well after the Muromachi period, through the Edo period, and still persisting even today. That's what makes it possible to have Totoros. So the autopsy. Okay. The autopsy. Miyazaki wants to write stories about how we're still connected to nature, and yet all of his films seem to end with us being disconnected. He wants us to have hope, but gives us hopeless, depressing characters. Structural and pacing issues with this film aside, it, like so many other narratives, lacks a hero with any motivation to be a hero, and that alone fixes a lot of what's wrong with things people think are stories. The other major problem here, of course, with it not being a complete story, is that its villain, Lady Eboshi, is neither defeated nor redeemed by our supposed hero, Ashitaka. Jigo as a villain, I suppose, is thwarted, which is good, but also not, because it wasn't in a way that would either have the Force Spirit survive or have its power remanifest in a new Kami, or at the very, very least, have its power transferred to some other character. I don't think that last one would work very well, though, because if if the Forest Spirit's death transferred its power, then narratively it seems like it would have to go to Ashitaka and San, but their narrative clearly needs to continue in the human direction. Maybe it could have resurrected Moro, though, as the new Forest Spirit. That would have been pretty badass. Princess Mononoke is far from being a story, and in terms of gravitas and authorial intent, its world building is left severely lacking, but it's otherwise very well designed and beautifully depicted. In these closing thoughts, I think I also realized something that might explain Lord Asano. Miyazaki may have just been trying to throw in a ham-fisted anti-war message with the scene where the soldier is burying the dead. In the scene where the soldier burying the dead is shell-shocked. But very confusingly, this is after the battle with the Boers and not with Asano's samurai. I think that's why this scene is emotionally confusing and breaks my immersion. Anyway, I'm done tearing apart Princess Mononoke. What not story I do next is completely up for grabs. I got a couple ideas in mind. This one did take a lot out of me, so I'll probably want to do something very different next. Maybe Kiki's Delivery Service.